Kansas. And I am a K through fifth music educator. I have my master's degree in special music education. And within our school, I am the equity champion. And I also do a lot with family engagement and dealing with equitable measures as well. So this has been something that's been on my heart for such a long time. And what I would like to go ahead and do is I want to go ahead and share my norms through three lenses. I'm going to ask that anything that I say today, that you don't buy anything, but you just merely rent some ideas, some headspace to what I'm about to say. I try to honor different perspectives and viewpoints and just be a good steward of the stories that people tell. So I really want you to speak up. I really want you to say something, because when I do this in person, there is a lot of speaking, but it's going to feel like a water hose. Like we're drinking from a hose this evening, because I have a lot of information. And at the end, I just want to hear what you think. I want to start out with this article that I found through James Baldwin, phenomenal activist, phenomenal writer, and it's a talk to teachers. So in 1969, he wrote, "The purpose of education finally is to create in a person the ability to look at the world for himself, to make his own decisions, to say to himself, this is black or this is white, to decide for himself whether there is a God in heaven or not, to ask questions of the universe, and then learn to live with those questions is the way he achieves his own identity." But no society is really anxious to have that kind of person around. What society really ideally wants is a citizenry which will simply obey the rules of society. So if a society succeeds in this, that society is about to perish. The obligation of anyone who thinks of himself as responsible is to examine the society and try to change it and to fight it at no matter what the risk. This is the only hope society has. This is the only way society changes. And so I want to offer you two posing questions. And this is where I usually would break out and we'd have a discussion about it. But right now, we're just going to do some internal investigation on how you feel. Do you believe that it's your responsibility to examine music education? So that's the first thing I want to ask yourself. Do you believe it's your responsibility to put in the work and to examine what we're teaching people, what we're bringing to the table? Is it your responsibility to examine that? And are you responsible in trying to change it? Even if the question is, do you even believe it needs to be changed? So those are the two things that I want you to think about. And actually, I want one of you to just go ahead and unmute yourselves, because we have a great amount of people in here to be able to just talk on this topic real quick. Can somebody just unmute and just answer the question? Do you believe it's your responsibility to examine music education? And then I'm going to ask you why.
Yes, I'll be that one if you need someone to do that.
Love it. Love it.
Question number one. Yes, I believe it's my responsibility to examine music education, and this is my reasoning behind that. For one, I am a contracted music educator in the public school system at the elementary level, and to me, as a musician, and to me as a person that has been given a charge to lead people into experiencing and becoming aware of what music is to some degree. It's my responsibility to find out and examine what repertoire I use. Does it service my student body, my student population? Is it culturally relevant? Does it speak to does it speak to me first of all? Do I see through the lens of, as a teacher, my class, would it be beneficial to music literacy? Would it be beneficial to experiencing another culture it authentically, not just to do it, but does it represent, embody everything that my program is stemmed on and built upon as far as the premise of the whole matter? So yes, it's my
Mm.
responsibility to examine it um, as it fits my unique teaching arena. So
I
that's
love that. I love that. Spencer, you right on with that. I love that. And number two, are you responsible in trying to change it if you believe it needs to be changed?
most definitely so. Yes, it's my responsibility. I feel as though there. I'll just share this a little bit, and I'll be done. I won't take up your time because I know we're on a schedule. But I recently was awakened to the World Music Pedagogy course, the Smithsonian Folkways
Hmm.
certificate. I received that this past summer, and that really opened my eyes to how to dig and to find authentic music, how to pinpoint what music that was, that people were people were selling and publishers were selling and pushing out to educators to use in the classroom. Was it authentic, or was it just something Americanized and they
That's
put a
good.
put a title on it and say, hey, you can use
Hmm.
this, but really, is it really something coming from that specific culture? So I
Hmm.
started implementing, here and there, once I was awakened to it, I started going through my repertoire and say, nope, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not, I'm taking that folk song out. We're not singing about a whore. We're not going to sing about
Right.
this, that, and the third. So once you start digging, you
That's
start
good.
finding out certain things. So yes, I would
Thank
say
you for valuing that. I really do appreciate that. And I love how you value that. Thank you so much. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about, Spencer, in relation to all that is, what does equity even mean? And
right.
so I want to go ahead and give you a working definition on this: the quality of being fair or impartial. And Spencer, the whole time you were speaking, I thought that you hit it right on. What does it look like to have a quality of being fair or impartial? When I looked into the definition of quality, it was a distinct attribute or characteristic. Okay. And so when we think of equity, the quality of being fair or impartial, my question to you is, what kind of distinct attributes or characteristics do you think someone that is fair or impartial demonstrates in the music classroom? Okay, so if our working definition is going to be fair or impartial with equity, what does it look like for someone in the music classroom to have these characteristics? Okay. And so, Spencer, I love your voice in the room. I want to go ahead and try to get maybe a couple more people. Anybody else want to throw something out there? What a fair or impartial person demonstrates? And I know we're going to be doing some internal investigating.
Yeah, well, I think the fair is a weird term to me. Like I have to think about what is fair, but impartial is kind of like what comes to mind at least is musically open and not putting value propositions on certain types of music or traditions, being open to the discussion about what's relevant to students and what they're interested in, things like that. And so I think if I'm engaged with someone who's kind of open to where we might take this and what's relevant to me and the students and how we're making these connections, that seems to be a little bit more of a nice place as to jump off from there. And then fair, again, I have to think about that word a little bit because it's like what's coming to mind is the difference between equality and equity, and is fair giving people what they need, or is it giving everyone the same thing, or is it uniform things? And so yeah, I have to sit with that a little bit longer.
I like that. That's a good answer. Good answer. When I think of rational, I think of somebody that employs clear and sensible thinking. And I want you to start asking yourself, am I these things? Do I examine both sides of an issue before forming an opinion? Do I make decisions based on hard evidence rather than emotions? I don't know about you guys, but as a K through fifth music educator, my emotions can be all over the place. And I really try to tell myself, here in our district, we take the Q-tip analogy and we say, quit taking it personally. And I don't know what you guys think about that, but I want I want to remove my, not saying that we can fully, but remove my emotions so I can think clearly. I believe someone is selfless. They're empathetic. They're willing to walk in another person's shoes before making a judgment. They climb the ladder of success and lift others up and are generally happy for their success. And when I think of somebody who's fair or impartial, I think of sound leadership. I believe that a person earns the respect of others through expertise, personal integrity, and ability to foster trust rather than demanding it. And I'm sure that a lot of us have heard people call themselves leaders, but really they are just authoritative figures. And you're like, man, where did leadership ever come from? All they're doing is taking credit for everything and telling me what I need to do or what needs to be done. But when I think of sound leadership, leadership is an action. I think of being a leader as someone doing. And there's a difference between leader and leadership. Leader is someone with authority that provides protection, direction, and order. Leadership is a risky activity to make progress on adaptive challenges. These are challenges that aren't black and white. They're not technical fixes. They're not, hey, my flute don't work, so let me go ahead and adjust something. Adaptive challenges is where you actually work with people that have an emotional response. So I'm going to ask you, can you see yourself in any of these? Are you rational? Are you selfless? Do you feel like you're a sound leader? Everything that these have in common are the following. Teaching is always inconvenient. When it comes to music education, we have to be unconventional. We have to be able to put ourselves in a position of saying it's not the norm. We all know that music education is uncomfortable. We know that it's costly, but at the end of things, we have to come together with a shared purpose and vision of saying that it's rewarding. And I can't tell you that since COVID hit, how many teachers around me have already made up in their mind that they gave up, and that's sad to me. That's sad to me that we know that it's going to be inconvenient, unconventional, uncomfortable, and costly. But we decided that the weight of all that outweighs the reward. And I want to remind us that it's a long-term, it's a short-term benefit or short-term discomfort for a long-term benefit. And I believe the investment in this is well worth it. So when we think of equity, the quality of being fair or impartial, I think of adding the term racial equity, because in my school district, we have a lot of white teachers and our demographic of students looks nothing like that. And I don't know what your demographic looks like. I would love if you guys could put that in the chat just so I can see what it looks like. We're probably about 60% Hispanic kids with 30% African American, 10% other. I'd be interested in seeing your demographic of students as well. My working definition for racial equity is about applying justice and a little bit of common sense. How many times do you guys work with people that just don't have common sense in areas? To a system that's been out of balance. When a system is out of balance, people of color feel the impact most acutely, but to be clear, an imbalanced system makes all of us pay. This is something that we all pay with. And my question would be, what are some barriers to racial equity in the music classroom? Why do you feel, if you even feel that, why do you feel in your classroom there's some barriers of racial equity? And what does that look like? What does it look like to be racially equitable? So I do want to, real quick, I want to offer the floor up to someone who wants to answer this. What do you feel are some barriers to racial equity in the music classroom?
Well, I think, certainly in my classroom, we're confined right now a lot to that traditional paradigm of what music education, certainly what I was taught music education was 20 years ago, where you've got band, choir, and we don't even have orchestra, so kids had band and choir. And that the music that is played in those ensembles is not appealing to every one of our students. And so all of a sudden we're excluding, not intentionally per se, but by the selection of the ensembles and certain things. And we've been able to expand on that. We've got guitar courses now in digital music production, and the entire demographics of our music department has changed. And so we're working towards being more equitable, but of course there's still a lot of progress to do. So
that's good. And for those people that haven't come to the realization that something needs to change, oftentimes when I speak with people, the number one reason why they don't want to move forward or progress in this is fear. As music educators, we don't want to look like we don't know. You know, we're the adults in the situation. And I can't tell you how many times I come across people saying, I don't want to say something wrong. I don't want to say something insensitive. I don't want to give out a sheet music of something that may be irrelevant that kids don't like because I don't want to be shut down. And I don't want to speak on something. I thought Dr. Howard did such a phenomenal job executing this and speaking on this, that people feel like they have to come up with answers when there's a lack of research that hasn't been, there's research that hasn't been done yet, and we fear of saying something insensitive because we just don't have all the information. But I do think that we got to start from somewhere. And to me, that somewhere is a heart condition. Music educators have to realize that it's the mind, the will, and the emotion of our kids and ourselves. How are we thinking? How are we doing? How are we feeling through all this? And I'm going to tell you that relationships, what's the first thing we learn in music education when we're taking a university level, an intro level? It's building relationships with people, right? That's the number one thing people tell us all the time. We're building relationships. We're building relationships. And to me, that's a mind, will, and emotion. That's a heart condition. You're going to have the desire to want to see racial equity. And I'm going to tell you that this conversation is just the start of the conversation. This is like, going to university, taking a 101 course. We got to even start the conversation of racial equity. Here's what I want to do, and I'm going to end on this, and we're going to talk a little bit about what you see, because I want your feedback and I want to kind of hear what you're thinking. Does anybody know what this picture is? Just take a look at it. And you can unmute, you can chime in.
Is it a body cam? I'm looking at the numbers.
It is a body cam.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a body cam. Does anybody know what it's of? Does anybody, well, actually, before I do this, let me just ask you, what are some things you see in this body cam before I give it away? Just shoot them out there. What do you see?
Something's
Bus stop.
Sorry, go ahead, Bry.
I would say a bus stop.
Okay, bus stop.
I'm looking at body language here and I'm seeing this and I'm seeing this. So not happy with whoever's looking at them, and it looks like an altercation's about to happen.
Yeah.
To me, it looks like it's about to go down. The girl on the right looks like she's saying something. She might know the guy. Yeah, unfortunately, if this is I'm guessing a policeman body cam, something bad's about to happen that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, the date and Cub Foods, that's in Minneapolis, George Floyd, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. And when I think of racial equity, I go back to this image right here. You see all these people standing on the sidelines, pointing, having their phones out, standing, watching, but doing nothing about it. There is nobody that is stepping out, and we know the outcome of George Floyd. There's nobody stepping out, seeing injustice and doing anything about it. So my question to you is, and my challenge is, if you were to see something in music education that was racially unequitable, would you be on the sideline watching? Because these people had valid, I'm going to tell you, they may look like they're doing nothing, but there may be valid fear there. Well, what if I try to step in? What would happen? Would something happen to me? They have some valid fear here, but what was the outcome of this, of someone not stepping in? There's so many variables in this picture, right? But when I think about racial equity, I have to ask myself, am I willing to count the cost of what it is to step in and to intercede on behalf of someone that can't do it for themselves? And that's where I'm going to leave this conversation. And I just want to talk about that. questions, thoughts, or concerns about anything that I spoke about, I wouldn't even mind all of us unmuting and just holding a quick conversation real quick. How are you feeling about this? Remember, this is just the start. What'd you think about the picture? What'd you think about some of the working definitions? What'd you think about me saying that oftentimes people don't jump in or commit to change because of fear?
I think when I see that picture, Abigail, and thank you for the presentation also, I note that there are people who embody whiteness, people who identify as white, and people who are white in that scenario. And with the way the policing system in the United States is, that perhaps the fear of violence from police may be lesser in those people, and that maybe those people need to utilize that privilege to stand out, because that fear is very real for marginalized populations. And though it is real to some extent for white people, there isn't a systemic kind of discourse that is threatening them. And I think that as someone who is white, I think that highlights that there is a responsibility placed upon those with privilege to speak up, because those who are marginalized do have a real genuine fear of retribution, violent or otherwise. And I think that picture helps to summarize that also.
I love that. I love that. You know, I brought this to another conference before just this conversation, and a woman met me outside that was listening. But by the way, I usually spend an hour on this conversation. And she said she was crying. And she said, "What am I supposed to do as a white woman? What am I supposed to do?" And I said, "You know what? When's the last time," and I didn't say it this abruptly, but I asked her, "When's the last time you had dinner or lunch with somebody, you sat across from somebody that was from a different racial background than you?" And she looked at me and she said, "I can't tell you when." Where does it start? If we're going to say that this is a heart condition, that doing racially equitable work is a heart condition, where does it start? What else?
We've got time for maybe one more comment question from the group. I'll go. I mean, I think one of the challenging things is it's also a little bit what Karen talked about. It's like, you know, we're here on a Friday night or whatever time it is where you are, trying to engage in these conversations and do this work. And then how do we, and then your first thing was like, hey, do you think music ed needs to change? And if so, are you doing anything about it? And I wonder if my path hadn't taken the path that it took in getting into higher ed, where it's kind of my job to question music ed practices and engage in that. I wonder if I'd just be like, I'm teaching music and it's fine, and band's open to anyone. And if students of color aren't signing up, well, that's fine, that's their choice, but I'm just going to keep doing this. Like, how do we broaden this conversation for colleagues who don't see the need to change, or who aren't interested in having these conversations, or are just trying to replicate the thing that worked for me or for them? And so it's you know, you brought up a lot of good questions, and I also want to think like, you know, who's not having these conversations because they don't see the need to change. Because if the answer to your first slide is like, no, I think things are fine, then all the subsequent kind of conversations we're having they don't hold as much water, because it's just like, no, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. And so I think the challenge is like, how do we have these conversations ourselves, and then how do we make them outward facing to include more people for whom they don't see the need to change?
That's good. That's good.
Well, that's our time. Thanks so much for you know, those thought-provoking questions. I want to make sure that folks have enough time to either go to the other session or come back into this one. And so I'll pause the recording here, and then